Megan Rapinoe stood on the field, her feet planted firmly on the green grass. She looked around the stadium, taking it all in. The bright lights, the buzzing sound of excited fans, the banners waving in the air. This was a moment she had dreamed of countless times, but today it felt different. This wasn't just another match, another win, or another celebration. It was the end of her soccer career, and the weight of it hung in the air like a heavy cloud. As the final whistle blew, signaling the end of the game, a wave of emotions rushed over her. For so many years, the field had been her second home. It was where she had worked hard, pushed her limits, and fought for every victory. Now she was about to leave it all behind. Megan stood there, frozen for a moment. As the crowd erupted in cheers, she could hear the applause and the chants of her name, but they seemed distant, like they were coming from another world. She had spent years training for this. Hours upon hours of practice, countless matches, and endless sacrifices. The road to becoming one of the greatest female soccer players was never easy. There had been injuries, setbacks, and moments when she doubted herself. But she had always bounced back, driven by her love for the game and her passion for representing her country. Today, though, none of that seemed to matter. The years of hard work were still fresh in her mind, but what stood out the most was the feeling of closure. Megan had achieved everything she set out to do. She had won trophies, broken records, and become an icon for women's sports. Yet, as the final whistle blew, it wasn't the victories that flooded her mind. It was the memories, the teammates, the friends, the moments shared on the field that she would never forget. She looked up at the crowd again, noticing the sea of fans still standing, applauding. Some waved signs, others wore shirts with her name on them. The support was overwhelming. It wasn't just about the game anymore. It was about everything she had represented. The struggles, the triumphs, and the fight for equality. Megan knew that her journey wasn't just hers. It had been a shared experience with so many others who had followed her path, cheering her on from the stands or watching from home. Megan took a deep breath and slowly walked towards the center of the field, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it, the moment she had been both dreading and looking forward to. As she stood there, she couldn't help but smile. This was the end of one chapter, but she knew, deep down, it was just the beginning of another. The crowd continued to cheer, and for a brief moment, Megan allowed herself to soak it all in. She wasn't just saying goodbye to soccer, she was stepping into the next part of her life. And no matter where that journey took her, she would always carry the memories of this moment with her. Megan Rapinoe stood in front of the microphone, her hands resting lightly on the edges of the podium. The crowd was still, waiting for her words. It was as if the entire stadium had paused, holding its breath for the next moment. Her heart raced, but she knew this was the moment she had been preparing for, not just in the past weeks, but throughout her whole career. This was more than just a farewell speech. It was her chance to express everything she had felt, seen, and lived through during her journey. The bright stadium lights shone down on her, but she barely noticed them. Her eyes moved across the sea of fans, her teammates standing in the back, and the many faces in the crowd who had supported her throughout the years. She cleared her throat softly, trying to steady herself, but the emotions were already beginning to rise. She took a deep breath and began speaking. "Thank you," she said, her voice carrying across the field. "Thank you to everyone who's been with me on this journey. It's been a ride, hasn't it?" She gave a small, nervous smile, and the crowd responded with a gentle laugh, as if they could all feel the same emotions she was going through. The tension in her body eased slightly, and she continued. "When I first started playing, I never imagined all of this. Being here with all of you, it wasn't just about soccer for me. It was about showing that women can do anything, that we belong, that we matter." Her voice grew a little stronger now, gaining confidence with each word. "The game taught me so much, not just about how to kick a ball, but about who I am and who I want to be." As she spoke, memories began to flood her mind. The early mornings when she was just a young girl, practicing in the rain, running alongside friends who shared her dream. The long hours on the field, pushing herself until she couldn't take another step. The wins, the losses, the celebrations, and the setbacks. It was all part of the journey, and she had never once wished for anything to be different. The challenges had shaped her, made her stronger, and had given her the chance to make a difference in the world. "I want to thank my teammates," she said, her voice softening. "Without them, none of this would have been possible. Soccer is a team sport, and every single person who stepped onto that field with me played a role in getting us to where we are today. We fought together, laughed together, and sometimes even cried together. But we always had each other's backs." Megan paused for a moment, her eyes glistening with emotion. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word she spoke. The weight of the moment seemed to settle in even more deeply. This wasn't just a goodbye. It was a celebration of everything she had accomplished, and a reflection on how much the sport had meant to her. "And finally," she continued, her voice now steady, "thank you to the fans. Your love and support have carried me through the toughest times. I will never forget the energy you brought, the cheers that pushed me forward, and the belief you had in me." The words hung in the air as she finished, and for a brief moment, Megan let herself take it all in. She had spoken her truth, shared her heart, and now, the crowd's applause felt like a warm embrace. It was a moment of closure, but also a reminder of how far she had come, and how far the sport would continue to grow, thanks to the path she had helped pave. As Megan finished her speech, the stadium was filled with a mix of emotions. Cheers echoed through the stands, but there was also a quiet energy in the air, something more than just celebration. It was a moment of reflection, of recognition, and of gratitude. Megan slowly stepped away from the podium, her heart still racing. She knew that what she had just said would be remembered, but it wasn't the words alone that mattered now. It was what came next. As she looked around the field, her eyes fell on the front row. There, sitting calmly in the midst of the crowd, was President Joe Biden. He wasn't alone. Seated beside him were other prominent figures from sports, politics, and various communities who had come to honor her. But it was Biden's presence that stood out the most. For years, Megan had fought not only for equality on the soccer field, but also for recognition of women in sports and social justice. Seeing someone like him here, acknowledging her efforts, felt deeply meaningful. Megan's gaze locked onto the president, and for a brief moment, she felt a connection. It wasn't just because he was the leader of the country. It was because he understood what she stood for. He had been one of the many voices supporting women's rights, pushing for change, and challenging the status quo. His presence here, in this moment, felt like an acknowledgement of all the hard work, all the struggles, and all the victories she had fought for, not just as a soccer player, but as a person who wanted to make a difference. In that brief moment, Megan felt a sense of peace. She had always known that sports could be a platform for change, but seeing someone like Joe Biden in the crowd, showing respect for her journey, made it clear that her voice had been heard. It was a reminder that the fight for equality wasn't over, but they were moving closer to a world where everyone had the same opportunities, the same recognition, and the same respect, no matter their gender or background. The crowd's applause continued, and Megan turned her attention back to the field. But she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. Here she was, a young girl who had started out with a simple love for soccer, now standing in front of the world, having done so much more than she had ever imagined. She had inspired countless others, opened doors for future generations, and become a symbol of strength and perseverance. But it wasn't just about what she had done on the field. It was about the people she had met along the way, the teammates, coaches, friends, and even rivals, who had all played a part in shaping her into the person she was today. The journey had been long and difficult, but every step had been worth it. Megan smiled to herself as she realized that this was not the end, but a new beginning. Whatever came next, she knew she had left her mark on the world. As the crowd continued to cheer, Megan looked up at the bright lights above, feeling both a sense of completion and excitement for what the future held. Megan stood silently for a moment, allowing the applause to wash over her. The crowd's cheers slowly faded, but there was still a feeling of warmth in the air, a sense of connection between her and the thousands of people who had come to support her. Yet, despite the overwhelming sense of accomplishment, there was an undercurrent of emotion that she couldn't ignore. The feeling of finality lingered, and she could feel it building up inside her. As she looked out over the stadium, Megan's mind wandered back to the beginning of her journey, the long hours of practice, the struggles, the early mornings, and the many people who had supported her. She thought about her parents, especially her mother. It was her mother who had driven her to early morning practices, encouraged her when she doubted herself, and taught her the values that had shaped her not only as a soccer player but as a person. When Megan spoke again, her voice was soft at first, a little unsteady. "I want to thank my parents," she said, her words taking on a deeper meaning. "Without them, none of this would have been possible." The words felt heavy, as if each one carried a piece of her heart with it. Megan's hands tightened around the sides of the podium, a small but firm gesture to steady herself. She had been strong for so long, but now, in this moment, she could feel the emotions breaking through. She paused, looking out into the crowd, trying to find the strength to continue. But it wasn't easy. There was so much she wanted to say, so many thoughts and memories that were rushing through her mind. Her mother's smile, the way she had always been there, no matter what. Her father's quiet strength, the way he would always know just what to say when she felt lost. All of it came flooding back. My mom, she never stopped believing in me. Megan continued, her voice cracking slightly. She wiped her eyes quickly, but it was clear that the emotions were too much to hold back. She pushed me to be my best, to always keep going, no matter how tough things got. And my dad, he was my rock. Always steady, always calm. He was the one who reminded me that no matter what happened on the field, it was just a game. But what really mattered was the person I was becoming. The crowd was silent now, watching her with understanding. Megan could feel the weight of her words, and she knew they were feeling it too. It was as if the stadium had transformed into something more, into a space where memories, emotions, and experiences were shared not just by her, but by everyone who had been a part of her story. As she took a deep breath, Megan tried to regain her composure. She was no longer just the athlete who had won championships and set records. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a woman whose journey had been shaped by the people she loved and the lessons they had taught her. Those lessons were the foundation of her career, and now they were the words that would carry her forward into whatever came next. The applause started again, softer this time, more personal, as if the crowd understood. Megan smiled, blinking away the remaining tears, and felt the weight in her heart begin to ease. It was time to take the next step, but she knew she wouldn't be taking it alone. Megan had just finished speaking, and the crowd's applause was still echoing in her ears. The stadium was alive with energy, but in the midst of it all, a quiet figure stood up. It was President Joe Biden. He didn't wait for any special moment or announcement. Without hesitation, he made his way through the rows of seats toward the field, moving calmly but with purpose. His gesture was simple, but it carried a deep meaning. In that moment, the cheers of the crowd seemed to grow softer, as if the world was pausing to witness something truly special. Megan didn't expect this. She had known that he had been invited to attend, but she had never imagined he would come forward in such a direct and personal way. It wasn't just his status as the president that made the moment stand out. It was the fact that he understood what she had fought for: the equality, the recognition, and the importance of standing up for what was right. Seeing him walk toward her, his expression sincere and respectful, brought something unexpected out of her. The crowd, sensing the significance of the moment, fell into a hush. All eyes were now on the two of them. Biden reached Megan at the center of the field, just a few steps away from the podium. The space between them seemed to stretch, but it felt like time had slowed down. Biden didn't say anything at first. He simply opened his arms. Megan, a little surprised but deeply moved, stepped forward and embraced him. It was a quiet hug, one that needed no words. In that simple moment, Megan could feel the years of hard work, struggle, and achievement all come together. The hug was more than just a gesture of support. It was a recognition of everything she had done, not just for herself, but for so many others. The crowd remained silent, watching the two of them. It was as if the world had become still. Megan felt the weight of her career, her impact, and the meaning of her journey. She had given so much, and now, in this unexpected moment, it felt like the world was giving something back to her. The embrace spoke volumes, not just from the president, but from the world around her. It was a moment of unity, a recognition of her struggle, and a sign that the fight for equality was far from over. When they finally pulled away, there were no grand speeches, no dramatic words. Biden simply gave her a nod of respect, and she smiled in return. It was a moment of understanding between two people who knew that what mattered most was the legacy they would leave behind, not just as individuals, but as part of something bigger than themselves. The crowd erupted into applause again, louder this time. Megan stood there, feeling a deep sense of peace. The game had ended, but this moment was a reminder that the journey wasn't over. And no matter what came next, she knew she had made a difference. As the final applause echoed through the stadium, Megan stood still for a moment, still feeling the weight of what had just happened. Her heart was racing, and her emotions were tangled, but there was also a deep sense of gratitude. She had said her goodbyes, shared her thoughts, and now she was standing in the middle of the field, facing a crowd that had supported her through every step of her journey. Then she noticed President Joe Biden still standing nearby. After their brief moment of connection earlier, he hadn't returned to his seat. Instead, he was waiting, watching her with an expression of quiet respect. For a brief second, it felt like time had slowed. The stadium around her seemed to fade into the background, leaving only the two of them in the center of it all. There was something unspoken between them, something that couldn't be captured in words, but only in the gesture that was about to happen. Without a word, Biden began walking toward her, his steps slow but purposeful. Megan's eyes locked on him as he approached, his hand extended toward her, offering not just a handshake, but a moment of solidarity. It wasn't a show or a performance for the crowd. It was a moment of human connection, a quiet recognition of everything she had worked for and achieved. As he reached her, Biden's hand gently rested on her shoulder. Megan, still taken aback by the sincerity of it all, felt the warmth of the gesture sink in. She didn't say anything at first. Words weren't necessary in that moment. The hug was all-encompassing, simple yet profound. It was as if the weight of her entire career, the wins, the struggles, the challenges, the triumphs, had been recognized in one embrace. For a few seconds, they stood there, holding onto that silent acknowledgement. Megan could feel her eyes begin to sting with the first signs of tears. This wasn't just the end of a game. This wasn't just the closing of a chapter in her career. This was a moment that was bigger than herself. It was a symbol of the journey she had taken, and the people who had helped her along the way, including the many who had supported her through the tough battles off the field. The hug was a quiet one, but it spoke louder than any words ever could. Biden didn't need to say anything. Neither did Megan. They both understood the significance of that moment. The fight for equality in sports, for equal recognition and respect, had been long and challenging. But here, in this moment, it felt like a victory, a quiet, personal victory that would resonate with her for the rest of her life. As they slowly pulled away, there was a brief, shared smile. The crowd, still holding its breath, began to clap again, this time in recognition of something deeper than just athletic achievements. They weren't just cheering for Megan Rapinoe the player, but for Megan Rapinoe the person, the leader, the advocate. Megan stood tall, feeling a sense of calm and peace. No matter what came next, she knew that this moment would stay with her forever. The game was over, but the journey was still ahead. As Megan stepped away from the embrace, the crowd's applause continued to fill the air. It was different now, softer, more personal. She stood in the middle of the field, taking in the moment, feeling the weight of the years of work, sacrifice, and growth. Yet despite the powerful emotions swirling inside her, there was a calmness that she couldn't ignore. This wasn't just the end of her career as a soccer player. It was the beginning of something new, something unknown, but something she was ready to face. Megan looked around the stadium once more, the banners waving in the breeze, the cheers from the fans, the lights that had lit up so many of her victories. All of it felt like a distant memory. She had spent so much of her life here, but now it was time to leave. She wasn't sure what the next step would be, but she had learned one thing for certain during her years on the field. She could handle whatever came her way. In the back of her mind, Megan thought about all the things she had accomplished. The wins, the records, the awards. They had been important, yes, but they didn't define her. It was the moments that couldn't be measured in statistics that meant the most. The friendships formed on the field, the lessons learned, and the opportunities she had to speak up for causes she believed in. Those were the things that had truly shaped her. The fight for equality in women's sports was one of the causes that had driven her for so long. She had seen how much the world had changed, but she also knew there was still so much work to be done. Even as she stepped away from the game, she understood that her voice still mattered. Her platform might look different now, but it was still hers to use for change. The thought of what came next didn't scare her. After everything she had been through, injuries, struggles with self-doubt, and the intense pressure of being in the public eye, Megan had learned to trust herself. She knew that no matter what, she would find a new path. It wouldn't be easy, but then again, nothing worth doing ever was. As she began to walk off the field, her teammates joined her, their faces filled with smiles and hugs. They didn't need words to understand each other. They had shared the same journey, faced the same challenges, and celebrated the same victories. The bond between them was unspoken but strong, and Megan felt a sense of peace knowing that they would continue to inspire others, just as they had inspired her. Megan paused at the edge of the field one last time. The lights shone brightly above her, and the cheers from the crowd still echoed in her ears. She smiled softly to herself, knowing that while the game may have ended, her impact would never fade. The road ahead was unknown, but she was ready for whatever came next. The future was hers to shape, and she was ready to keep fighting. For herself, for others, and for the next generation of athletes who would one day walk the same path she had. As Megan walked toward the tunnel, leaving the field behind her, she felt a strange sense of closure. The sounds of the crowd still echoed in her mind, but now it was quieter, almost peaceful. She wasn't rushing. There was no need. Today wasn't just the end of a match or even a season. It was the end of an era for her. The era of Megan Rapinoe, the soccer player, was over, but something inside her told her that this wasn't the end of her story. The locker room was filled with her teammates, all of them buzzing with excitement and pride. The women who had shared her victories, her losses, and everything in between now surrounded her. They had all seen her evolve, from a young, passionate athlete to a fierce advocate for change. And now, they were watching as she prepared to step away from the game. Megan sat down on a bench, her eyes scanning the room. Each teammate had their own journey, their own goals, but they all shared one thing. They had made history together. She couldn't help but smile, thinking about how far they had come, not just as players, but as a team united by something bigger than the game itself. They had pushed boundaries, challenged norms, and shown the world what women's sports were capable of. As her teammates came to congratulate her, each one expressed their gratitude in their own way. Some offered simple words of thanks, others shared a laugh, but all of them made it clear that Megan's impact went far beyond her skills on the field. She had been a leader, a voice for those who didn't have one, and an inspiration to countless young athletes who now saw a path where none existed before. But Megan knew it wasn't just about what had happened in the locker room or on the field. It was about what happened next. The world was watching, and the conversations had only just begun. The challenges that women's sports faced were still there, but now there was more hope, more determination to change things. Megan had helped plant the seeds for that change, and though her career as a player had ended, her role in the fight for equality was far from over. As she stood up to leave, her eyes lingered on the trophies that sat in the corner of the room. They were reminders of what she had achieved, but she also knew that the real victory wasn't in the trophies or the accolades. It was in the impact she had made, the doors she had opened for the next generation. She had fought for something bigger than herself, and in the end, that was what mattered most. The future was unknown, but Megan was ready for whatever came next. The path ahead was hers to shape, just as it always had been. And as she walked out of the locker room, leaving behind a life she had known for so long, she couldn't help but feel excited for the journey ahead. The fight for equality, for respect, for change. Her legacy would continue, not just in the history books, but in the lives of those who followed in her footsteps. The world had changed because of her, and it would continue to change long after she was gone.